Hello, I'm Kevin Moore, and this is a Twilight Talks 2021 end-of-year special.
As the sun sets at the end of a New York workday, the mind transitions from daily tasks to the cloudier, more philosophical regions of social issues, culture, and politics. In a democracy, every perspective on the world is important, and people in art and culture have surprising bodies of knowledge that can shed fresh light on today's reality.
Twilight Talks began its fifth season in early 2021 in a riptide of transitional politics. Inauguration, insurrection, vaccinations, all of the controversies that characterized the year. Most of our guests had in some way learned to block out the noise and focus on their own creativity.
When I think about all the things that I've studied and things I've attached myself to over the years, I think I've always been interested in the path of a line. Like the movement of a mark, however it's made, a chisel in wood for woodcut, drawing on paper, stitching in fabric, which I did a lot of in graduate school. Sort of been interested in the movement of a point from here to there. So that's a sort of general thing to say. But really the installations came about through a couple of key experiences. One was a residency at Art OMI where I had been working with thread in sort of bundling forms, like brush kinds of forms. And I was just inspired by the physical environment that I was working in and found myself holding this sort of shimmering yellow thread in the blue light of the studio and realized like, whoa, what would happen if I put this in space rather than on a surface?
I started doing clay because I kind of felt I should stop painting with turpentine and oil when I had, a small child sort of living next to my studio or whatever. And then I clay to me was so much more of a sort of living material in a way, The last couple of years I've been trying to make them a little less fragile, which is sort of a problem I seem to have with most things I make that, thread, porcelain, paper, they're all
Conservator's
hard.
nightmare.
Nightmare.
Through a lot of the maneuvers that I've been developing as I've been learning to control and work with and reroute the energy of my Tourette spasms, I found that vocalization can be a really useful tool in providing stabilization in other parts of the body. So a lot of my Tourette's spasms are vocal. I was not doing performances all along. My background and most of my intense training was in sculpture and furniture making.
I was always interested in narrative because I love to read and I love film. So storytelling was something, in Russia I thought I was going to study literature. Obviously when I came here, my language was nowhere. But my work really started as a lot of self-portraits. It kind of felt like, everything is so uncertain, but I can look at my face in the mirror. I think the work is changing because the characters are staying similar age, but I'm not. I'm becoming older, so I'm trying to figure out what that means, So it became from being what I thought was my peers, a projection of me, to now it's more like a certain sense of wistfulness, and maybe memory.
Landscape itself is like a fusion of what you see and what you remember.
Right. Yeah, I love the idea of landscape being a memory, like a projection, or this projection of a psychological state.
I started music lessons and I had to pick an instrument to start. So my father loved the cello, so I just went straight for the cello, and then I fell in love with the cello, and then I played cello for many years. So when I was out of class, I had to wait for my older cousin. He would take me back home. And then I would just wait hanging around the university outside of the conservatory, and I would start hanging with these people around the bonfire.
This little kid.
And they all had guitars. Because there was a bunch of hippies singing revolutionary Latin American songs. And I just fell in love with this kind of folk element. So I was listening to Silvio Rodriguez, I was listening to Violeta Parra, Mercedes Sosa, which is what I would call like our Bob Dylans of the time, like this kind of singer-songwriters. And eventually the guitar just got a more prominent place, and I just switched because I realized that I could do also classical music in the guitar.
Yeah.
The work that I've been doing for 20 or 30 years now has really started with an idea or something I wanted to work on or work about, quite often in quite a broad way. And the fact that I work just in wood and for a long time just in furniture or in architectural forms was this very narrow channel that I had to get these ideas through. And for many people that would have been a constraint, but for me it actually turned out to be a strength, because I only had one way of saying things and I had to make that way say the things that I wanted to say. So for me, it's never been about context or about placement. It's always been about something else that was riding with the work.
I just could never understand what the gesture in my practice was.
Right.
And a few years ago, I was visiting my sister, and I was on a beach in North Carolina, and there was a leaf of grass, and the wind was blowing it, and it was rubbing against the sand, and it was creating this beautiful circle. And when I saw that, I was like, even a leaf has a gesture, you know? And I don't know why that triggered, helped me understand what it is that I do,
I started photographing horses in 2019. I think I had a very specific project in mind. I was trying to channel Peter Hujar's animal photographs. He was known to talk to them and coax them, and which he didn't do with his human subjects.
Taking a picture every day, how did that become a routine?
I've come to understand that it is something that defines all of us, not just me. It's like the things that we repeat every day define us.
You started the Window series almost immediately once moving here.
Yes, I arrived in August '94 and I started it in early '95. I also have that kinship to black and white in terms of its history. There are two cameras. One is from the late 1900s, so about 1890, and the other one is from the 1920s. And that's somehow also I wanted to reference that time gap, that leap, and it made sense to do that in black and white.
I've always been both a photographer and a writer since the very beginning. But I was a photographer first, and if I'm at all useful as a writer, I would say that much of what I've learned about writing, I've actually learned from photography. How to find the evocative physical detail, which in writing can become how to find the evocative turn of phrase that somebody else uses, which then becomes dialogue in your...
Your writing's very descriptive, I would say, and
it's very descriptive, it's very visual, it's very rich, it's very tactile.
Right.
And so all of that comes from the lesson of photography.
The grinding political and social scene, however, continued to color the thoughts of artists working through this difficult historical period. Many had very specific perspectives to share.
As much as I am politically active and I have very strong opinions about sort of current events and freedoms that are being trampled all over the world, at the same time I do realize that my work is frivolous and it is about that sort of not only nonsensical but also kind of all permissible unaccountability. Honestly, I think when the work actually gets made, there is very little of conscious construct that happens, and it's kind of... But I think in retrospect, when I look back at even older work or at things as current as last week, I realize there are certain ways that I can relate work to the current events, things that are sort of running in the back of my mind or one's mind. But I think at the same time, I am definitely living vicariously through the work that I make to some extent. But with that said, the debauchery is also that way of like violence on paper, or again, debauchery on paper, anything that kind of you still come out, you can still go to bed at 9.
One of the greatest mysteries is, and it was true in the period immediately following September 11th, it was true January 6th this year, is why people in a country that has so much, that offers so much to its people, not to every person, my God, I mean, any number of people in this country are suffering in all sorts of ways, but I'm not sure that those who were suffering are the ones who we saw on January 6th either. To me, it's a great mystery why people who live in societies that have so much can be as angry as many people in the United States seem to be. I don't get it. One of the most dangerous things about us is that very few of us have any direct memory of what war is. I had a little tiny bit of an experience of war, which was standing on this terrace, watching that airplane crash into the Trade Center and explode, and knowing that it was full of people and that they had all just been burned alive. One feels, looking at Afghanistan, one feels looking at global warming, you feel a sensation a little bit like when you're out there swimming in the sea and you've gotten a little bit too far out, and the sea is enormous. And if you're strong, if you're lucky, if you're determined, maybe you can swim back to the shore.
Yeah, I actually feel I have almost no gift for the present tense, and the reason I feel that, I guess, is because I'm overwhelmed with fear and dread about it. So it actually was a way to admit to myself that I was thinking about these things by traveling back in time, because I actually remember very well the first kind of fear of society kind of moment I had, and I was working at a magazine and I just remember having a feeling about certain dynamics and people there that it was like the collectivization of farms, and how people would just sort of turn in their neighbors for sort of nonsense in order to get their farm. And I just thought, I'm in that situation. If we were under Stalin, I would be turned in. I know I would.
In 2004, when Bush was re-elected, I felt that I needed to start making work that addressed issues outside the studio.
So the step into politics then?
The step into politics was a necessary leap. I had no idea how to do it. And when I lecture, I quote my neighbor who said, "You can't make political work out of wood, Francis."
Doris Salcedo does it. She does it pretty well.
She does it beautifully, absolutely. And so, in fact, it was, in a sense, it was the same, a specific geopolitical situation, which was Katrina hitting New Orleans, and my ending up down there working, that opened up a way of making work about it. But it included photography, as you know, and that work, and then the bodies of work that came immediately after that. The photograph, as well as the built object, together spoke about what it is that was my concern. And it wasn't, for me, just what happened in New Orleans. It was that what we saw in New Orleans was revealing what I see in the trailer park down the street here, which is poverty and social injustice in this country.
For me, there's a lot in the Negative Space Project that follows and points to this condition. This isn't a surprise. It may be a fast forward or an exacerbated version of something we've been heading towards, but it's not, it's been in the air, and it's terrible and wonderful in the same breath that it asks us to address our lived experience differently and our relationship to other people differently and to the planet, for that matter.
The drawings really come in waves. I tend to work in a collection of, like a palette for a period of time, and then the landscape changes, the responses I have to what's going on around me in politics or social space or whatever change. I mean, my recent work is has a high intensity to it. It's very emotive.
Are these the ones you're calling flash drawings?
Yeah.
You've been doing those during the pandemic, more or less, right? As a kind of emotional register of what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, really on a weekly basis, another drawing appears. I mean, they're really my responses to what's going on. I mean, the rise and fall of cases and the political response and so on. And somehow these flashes of color and intense shifts of contrast get at my emotional response, which is sometimes quite calm and other times quite a bit of rage.
There's still this sense of freedom here that is, especially now, is not possible in Russia. At the time when I was leaving, there were so many changes that last year. You know, we kind of stopped studying at school, like we were just playing cards.
It broke
like
down.
It was like this chaos, you know, that was starting to happen.
What we saw in Germany, the Germans weren't all bad people, and yet they all performed very poorly. We have the same thing in the United States. We have about 30% of the American public that has not succeeded. And because they haven't succeeded, they are hateful. that they feel the system has deprived them of success, not recognizing that it's true at times, but in many cases, it's themselves to blame, not the society. I haven't changed my political views. They remain the same. I feel we live in an enormously wealthy country, and there isn't any reason in the world that there should be poverty in this country. We suffer from a lack of dividing the wealth that we have.
Yeah.
And I think Biden is the first president I know who's really making some attempt, at least. He sounds as though he's making an attempt to equalize the situation a little better.
Yeah.
And I hope he succeeds.
2021 offered a pervasive feeling of broken systems and being in between old and new ways of doing things. This stressful condition also fostered growth and new ideas.
I think it's this question of when an artist makes their work to make has to make a certain amount of work to make a living, has to produce at a certain level. And the cost of living is such that you have to maybe not mass produce, but I'm going to use that term because I do think we're kind of, it pushes on that threshold of
the studio with the assistants and the more volume.
The studio as a site of production instead of the studio as a site of process. The idea that there's a value in art as a process and as a kind of lived experience, as a kind of work that someone does in the world that may or may not even result in anything that's sellable, but that has somehow a fundamental value for our culture, or that we must agree upon that somehow to continue to, I think, even support or want art to exist.
This thing you do in the Goddess, where you're reciting a text that you've written, but you're doing it through a recording. You're like listening to your own recording, and you're speaking it almost simultaneously.
I started doing it just to solve a purely technical problem, which was my bad memory. And then I went to a performance artist talk by Suzanne Bocanegra, but an artist was listening to a feed of her voice, and a light went off in my head, and I thought, if I can do this, it'll make my life so much easier.
That way of like, if you don't need it, why bother? So I thought the same, like when I draw, I'm like, well, this person is sitting down, they don't really need feet. So you omit the feet, so it becomes that B.
But you like that time period in some ways.
I do, and I think partially the artifice and the pretense, I'm genuinely intrigued. And I think to some extent, just like the idea of clubbiness that you have mentioned, it's that club of one's own. I am my own club, and I am the one who tries to get out, and I can't.
Right.
And I think just like you mentioned with art history, I think the inadvertent quoting that happens, because once you're exposed to information, it's very difficult to get rid of it. And I think to some extent the whole, often conversation around Picasso and or especially on the very primitive level, like, oh man, he could draw so well, why cubism, why, distortions? But it's exactly that, trying to get rid of things that you know, so you can suddenly invent pancakes, and you can't.
They feel very caring, but also too, there's a bit of wrestling, there's a bit of, there's sort of a whole palette of different, kinds of human expressions toward one another that happen in them.
That's something that I always try to keep in mind, and I mean the way that, especially working with another person, the collaboration, I feel that always comes from care and love. I cannot really collaborate with someone that I don't feel like I really love in the first place.
They're pretty intimate.
Yeah. I mean, it's really intimate, and it is really caring, and there's a lot of trust that goes sort of beyond the typical conceptions of trust and empathy, where maybe the most powerful form of empathy in that moment is not necessarily doing what someone else might think is right for that person, but letting them experience that intensity or that agony, and knowing that you both know that it's okay.
I think it's sort of almost exactly kind of manifests interests that I have, where it's sort of, there's kind of systems and logic and things that we associate mostly with science, but that of course become really interesting at the peripheries. That area has always been sort of hot and magnetic for me. Also from the other side, there are lots of ways to talk about scientific stories, but often when you look close at them, they have arcs that have to do with passion or paranoia or superstition, and they enter into this other realm, and something very interesting happens.
Many of this year's guests came to New York from other countries, embracing an exhilarating and often lonely path towards inspiration.
When I was 14, 15, I was already working professionally. I started working mainly with Latin American music. Mm-hmm. So I would sing and play with Latin bands all over Colombia, and it was actually really fun, and I learned a lot from these good friends from the past. And then when I came to New York, my scholarship covered school, but not housing. Mm-hmm. So I had to make a living somehow. What am I going to do if I still not ready to start a classical career when I was 18, 19? Mm-hmm. So I started playing gigs around the city, and then I met a lot of jazz musicians, and New York is the right place to meet people from all over the world. And I think that's what I've learned by being in touch with folk music and jazz friends and gypsy energies, you know. It's like classical music has helped me in to build this kind of technique and a specific intellectual way of approaching and having the possibilities of perfectioning the craft, like to be precise, to be where it has to be, but also feeding your soul with other elements. I think is very, very important.
Let's talk about then some of the things you describe in the New Yorker article, the different businesses. But it's fascinating though for just this weird, diverse set of experiences at any given moment of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like the neighborhood is not unified like a lot of neighborhoods are by culture, place of origin, or outlook. It sort of doesn't have that unity. Instead, it has a kind of almost like a unity like an airport or so, you know, there's just it's sort of the drama of who's in the bathroom crying. It's just like a weird population. It's a weird, incoherent population in I think a nice way. Yeah.
I was living in South Africa. I was in the years of transition from apartheid to democracy in that country, and I thought I would stay there, but then the tempting offer was to get a scholarship to come to New York, and what young artist can turn that down? So I was kind of still holding on to that transition and not wanting to leave, and on the other hand, hoping for that New York experience. Always, read that cliche of saying, New York holds a promise, and I can't say that New York has not made good on that. It's made incredibly well.
My weird journey from being half Vietnamese, half French, and then, spend some time in Japan and moving to America it's all there in the work, and it's really hard to piece out what is what, but it is definitely a dark female archetype that's very much Japanese, and that you find in horror movies or like stories of Japanese ghosts, and that is in my work. Japan has the most superficial, feminine kind of stereotypes, and has also the most complex, darkest, most fascinating and dangerous female archetypes. I'm really interested in exploring things from different sides, and I find that also in American culture, and I think the superficial, that the the manicured hands and all this like female decorative attributes, I don't find it as much in France, and I think that's why I had this attraction and pull. Keep it head up, keep it hot, strong.
I grew up in the city, in Kathmandu, and especially when I was growing up, we couldn't really get out of the city because there was kind of like a civil war going on, Maoist and all that. I was actually watching a documentary, and it was talking about that, and I was thinking like maybe if the hippies didn't come there, the music scene wouldn't be as it is right now, and because Kathmandu is so much influenced by rock and roll and like all the 60s, 70s classic rock stuff. So I think that played a really important part.
You do a lot of busking in the New York subway, and you like doing that. But it's a stage, right? I mean, it's a place to perform with an audience.
So I started busking in 2013 when I moved to the US. My first summer I went to Ocean City, Maryland. And I went there to work, and I saw this guy performing on the street, and I thought it was cool, you know. So I wanted to try it out. So I bought an amp and a mic, and I started playing, and it turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
People really appreciated what I was doing. So I thought, wow, I could just play music and earn a living doing that.
Yeah.
When I started busking, I didn't really sing, you know.
Right.
I learned how to sing and like my tone for the voice. It started evolving, and as I kept on doing it, I think I was evolving every year, you know, and my voice was kind of changing, and whenever I did covers, I would try to sound like an artist that I was listening to at that time, and then slowly I evolved and found my own voice.
Walking by down this mountain, the strength of the turning tide.
You have this new video, a song. I don't know the name in Nepali, but it means something like souls, right?
Oh yeah, Anaginti Atma. Anaginti means uncountable, and Atma is souls. The song is basically about when I was moving to the city in 2017, and I had this vision since when I was writing that song about being about the city and showing the different parts of the city.
As we navigate this changing world, searching out new places or recommitting to old ones, remember to keep the fires of the imagination alive, because often solutions to the planet's problems come from the surprising recesses of our own unique minds. From Twilight Talks, we wish you a beautiful, inspired, and healthy holiday season.